Tonight on the Art House Drive-In Picture Show.
Intent. How did you establish that?
Well, a naked man is chasing a woman through an alley with a butcher knife, a heart on. I figure he isn't out collecting for the Red Cross.
Then,
many of my guests thought I was joking, so I established this trophy room. I always bring them here before the hunt. An hour with my trophies, and they usually do their best to keep away from me.
And now, here are your projectionists, Charles Wood and Aaron Woodsworth.
Welcome to the Art House Drive-In Picture Show. I am Charles, and that over there is Aaron. Aaron, how are you, my friend?
I am doing very well, thank you. Hello, everyone.
Do you feel lucky?
I do. And we will see how that pays off. Because there's a 50-50 chance.
Right.
So we'll see how it turns out.
Tonight, we're covering two films that have some sort of connection to Zodiac in Dirty Harry and The Most Dangerous Game. Do you remember the first time you saw either of these movies?
The first time I saw Most Dangerous Game was this last week.
Uh-huh.
Dirty Harry, though, I absolutely remember because it's just nostalgia to me. Like, that's where I grew up.
Right.
So it's 70s, Bay Area. Watching it again was just a memory lane thing.
Yeah.
It's so good.
That's cool.
So I absolutely remember it. But also at that point, the elementary school that I went to was not too far from my house. So, but it would get out and they had these 3 o'clock movies. And whenever it was Clint Eastwood Westerns, like Hang 'em High is on at 3.
Right.
Me and my brother would run home. We would get home sweating and panting and just plop down in front of the TV. Like, did we make it? And then it's just watching Clint Eastwood Westerns. So plus I'm just like a huge fan of Streets of San Francisco.
Yeah.
That happened a little later, but this is my genre.
Yeah.
So I loved it. And I'm a kid.
Yeah.
So of course I'm like absolutely responding to him just shooting bad guys, like due process. Like, as a kid, I don't even know what due process is. Like, so great memories of all of that. It was like how it felt in the opening crawl for Fincher's Zodiac, that shot out the window of the car. And you're just seeing the neighborhoods of 70s California. And I was just like, whoa, it just hits me in the feels, as they say. So I loved it. What was your reaction?
Man. Let's see. The first time I saw Dirty Harry probably would have been on like the Sunday night movie, I guess. Like on NBC or something like that.
Yeah.
And so it was heavily edited. I mean, because the funny thing about this film is that it's one of the first times, you're hearing fuck and you're seeing nudity and you're seeing all the stuff. Like before it had happened, of course, in low budget movies and quote unquote hippie movies, like New Hollywood stuff. But this was like Don Siegel, who was an old hand as far as directing. Man, he directed Invasion of the Body Snatchers, so this guy had been around, and this was a studio film with a somewhat established studio star. Yeah. So they're kicking around fuck words and nudity like they're getting away with something, So absolutely. The original version that I saw was really cut up, and I remember liking it. I mean, like I remember as a kid, I'm like you, like I liked Westerns and I liked cop shows and stuff like that. Yeah. And I remember, getting myself to make the noise of the 357 Magnum firing, like, because we played guns in the neighborhood. Like we were in a suburban neighborhood, but we didn't have a whole lot of money. So a lot of times an old golf club we found in a vacant lot was a gun for our war game. Yeah. So, I remember really liking it as a kid. I know that as I've gotten older, I feel like I gravitate more towards Magnum Force.
Which is funny because you and I do our own like prep things for these. But I watched Magnum Force immediately after watching this.
Yeah.
Because I was like, all right, different director, same character. It's the second time out. They don't have to establish him that much. And it is a much tighter, stronger movie.
Yeah, I think it is. I mean, like, my impression, like in my brain, I have ideas of movies. You know what I mean? Like when somebody says Dirty Harry, I have an idea of the movie. And then sometimes when I watch the movie, it just doesn't match up to that idea.
Me too. It was exactly me watching it.
Yeah.
Because I didn't go in and rewatch it. I have like the go-to Eastwood ones, but I was realizing as watching it, like I haven't watched this one in a long time.
Right. Well, let's get into the movie because I really want to continue talking about a comparison with Magnum Force later on, because Magnum Force is a different beast altogether, and it seems like they tried to course correct the character or something. So let's get into it, and we'll talk about this. Attention patrons. The movies discussed on this podcast will be spoiled from start to finish. If you wish to experience these cinematic gems visually, please do so before continuing with this episode. We will be right here when you return. Thank you and have a pleasant evening.
And now, please enjoy our feature presentation.
This is about a movie about a couple of killers. Harry Callahan. And a homicidal maniac. The one with the badge is Harry.
Halt!
There were a lot of reasons they called him Dirty Harry. And he kept inventing new ones.
Don't pass out any.
Clint Eastwood. Detective Harry Callahan. You don't assign him.
Stop!
To murder cases. You just turn him loose.
Now, what the hell is he doing up there?
Dirty Harry tells the story of a San Francisco police inspector named Harry Callahan, played by Clint Eastwood, a widower cop who uses his Magnum more often than he uses his handcuffs. In fact, he might not even own handcuffs. He gets yelled at by his superiors and growls back quippy responses because he's a man. He blows away a group of bank robbers and destroys a city street while eating a hot dog because he's a man. And when an elusive, yet very publicity-driven, serial murderer called the Scorpio Killer begins terrorizing the streets of San Francisco, Harry makes it his personal mission to bag the bastard, regardless of whether his methods are legal or not, because he's a man. And he does all of this while asking criminals if they feel lucky, because, well, it's hard to remember so much dialogue. The Scorpio Killer, played by the comically arch Andrew Robinson, leaves a letter at the sniper perch on the roof of a skyscraper after his first murder, which is the shooting of a young woman swimming in the rooftop pool of a nearby building. And then it's on. The mayor wants to pay the $100,000 ransom demanded by the Scorpio. Harry is then assigned a partner named Chico Gonzalez, played by Remy Santioni. Harry hates having a partner, especially one that's a college-educated Latino, because he's a man. And all of his previous partners are either dead or in the hospital. The SFPD has cops stationed on rooftops and a constant helicopter patrol. The helicopter catches Scorpio attempting to shoot a gay man in broad daylight. The cops call the murderer out over the loudspeaker before he can carry out the killing, and he flees. After the Scorpio kills the young black boy with a sniper shot, the cops decide to stake out the roof where the helicopter patrol saw the killer, thinking he'll return. He actually does, and he and Harry exchange gunfire, but the Scorpio escapes, killing a cop along the way. Then, the Scorpio kidnaps a teenage girl and sends an especially gory ransom note to the city, along with articles of clothing, locks of hair, and one of her teeth. The city gets the ransom money together, and Harry gets the job of being the bagman. The deal is that Harry is going alone, but he and Chico have another plan. They get a wireless communications setup that reaches for just a couple of blocks, and Chico follows Harry as the Scorpio has Callahan run from payphone to payphone all over the city. After nearly being mugged by some hoods and being propositioned in the park, Harry meets the Scorpio at the base of a huge cement cross in said park. There, the Scorpio beats Harry up and nearly kills him, but Chico intervenes, breaking the whole bagman comes alone clause of the ransom note. Scorpio then fires his machine gun on Chico, injuring the detective severely. While Scorpio's distracted with Chico, Harry stabs Scorpio in the leg with a switchblade Callahan stashed in his sock earlier. What follows is a manhunt that is over fairly quickly as Harry catches up to Scorpio in a football stadium and tortures him to find out where the kidnapped girl is buried. Turns out, the girl was already dead, and her killer gets out of jail because Harry illegally shot him and tortured him to find the girl's location. From here, Harry starts following the Scorpio on his off time, and the killer notices. So Scorpio goes to an abandoned building where he pays a man $200, and the guy beats the shit out of Scorpio to make it look like Harry brutalized him again. The press is all over Scorpio as he's rolled down the hospital hall on a gurney. Meanwhile, Harry visits Chico and finds out his new partner has decided to quit the force and teach. Scorpio robs a liquor store and takes the owner's gun. Then he uses it to take a school bus full of children hostage. And he makes yet another ransom demand, this time $200,000 and a plane to fly him away. The mayor is going to pay him again, and Harry is so appalled by this that he refuses to be the bagman this time. But he is going to get that bastard Scorpio and endanger the lives of the bus driver and the children because he's a man. After an action sequence that involves Harry jumping from a bridge onto the roof of the bus and a chase through a quarry, Harry catches up to Scorpio and delivers his iconic "Do you feel lucky, punk?" speech, and then shoots Scorpio dead. As the killer sinks to the bottom of the quarry lake, Harry throws away his badge and walks away. Who cares about due process?
Yeah. I want to start, if that's okay, if I can ask you a question, just offhand. As a whole, as a functional movie, do you feel like this movie is an effective movie? Because I'm going to pre-answer a little bit for you, but upon rewatching this movie does not have, I guess, your traditional 3-act structure.
Right.
It just kind of goes all over the place until the end.
Right.
And I don't know, I was thinking that, and I want to know what you think about just how this functions as like a story across the movie.
There are a number of credited screenwriters on the film. I think there are 2 to 4, something like that. And I think it feels that way. You know, there's some movies that when you watch it, you say, oh, wow, there are 4 screenwriters on that. That's weird because it felt like a cohesive voice.
Yeah, yeah.
With this movie, I know what you're saying because it's almost like a 4-act type thing.
Yeah.
And I was trying to think if I had ever seen an action film previous to this that tried to do what they tried to do with Callahan here, in that, you know, you set him up in this action sequence at the beginning of the film that doesn't have anything to do with anything else in the film.
Yeah.
So, you know, you have the killing at the beginning with the Scorpio shooting the woman from one rooftop to another rooftop.
Just like a great intro for a movie. It's like very effective.
Yeah, it's a fantastic intro. I mean, it actually feels a lot like Magnum Force in that respect, because I think Magnum Force opens that way, or opens with something similar. But, you know, you see Harry then do some investigation, but his investigation is so kind of rudimentary. And when he goes up to the rooftop where the Scorpio is, he finds the note and everything. You think, okay, well, this is getting off to a start. This is a Don Siegel movie, so we're going to hit the ground running. But then you take this detour where he goes to eat lunch and there's a bank robbery, and he stops it by basically destroying the entire street, pretty much, you know, along with these robbers. So that kind of stuff made the movie feel more like a 4-act, 5-act type film.
Yeah.
Rather than, you know, being a self-contained story. And I also think kind of the ebbs and flows of the sequences in the film almost gave it a video game type structure, you know, because it always felt like, okay, there's a mission here, and this is a side mission, but then now here's the first mission, and oh, the Scorpio got away, and so then here's another mission, and oh, the Scorpio got away, so then here's the final mission, you know?
Right, that's a really good reference.
So, I mean, it's basically, I mean, in saying that, I realized that I have the same problem with this movie that I have with The Dark Knight, in that, like, I love the movie The Dark Knight, but it also feels very much like a video game.
I can see that too. I have less of a problem with Dark Knight, I think, than with this. For some reason, this was reminding me of one of the things with new horror stuff, movies like The Nun, or some of those things. I know there was this one about Slender Man.
Right.
And Dirty Harry is not this bad.
Right.
But it poses as a story, but it's like a series of scary vignettes.
Yeah.
Stacked back to back to back. And so this movie starts awesomely with that sniper shot. And then you introduce the city and Callahan and the music.
Right.
Like, great beginning.
Yeah.
So understated as a beginning. He just walks up like, hey. And you're like, well, I guess there he is.
This is okay. It's starting. Okay.
But then it's literally like, it just seemed to lack focus in a way that I didn't remember.
Yeah.
Like they just kind of drive around.
Yeah.
They walk around, and then, he eats. There's that thing.
Right.
But then it's just like, I don't know. Hey, there's a guy with a briefcase. We should make this scene into something like it.
Yeah.
It took a while to get to the point where, hey, we're going to deal with this Scorpio guy again.
Yeah, right. Well, I mean, I understand that, because there, you know, that you say that, there is a lot in there, because I tend to like think about the Scorpio story in the film, but then you also have to think about the introduction of Chico, Harry's new partner, and you have to think about the tan suitcase guy with Hot Mary, you know, where Harry gets the shit beat out of him for basically peeping in a window, but he thinks he's going after the killer, but he's not. It is, I mean, in a way, it's kind of like it mimics the blind alleys in Zodiac, you know, where you're going down this alley and they're like, no, it's not this guy who calls in on the morning show. That's not him. We got to go back and start over, you know.
Definitely. I think that in Zodiac, those all made perfect sense.
Yeah,
as far as where the information took you. New information spawned new avenues of investigation. So
I feel like these two movies had very different intentions, even though they had similar content, you know, because I think that really Dirty Harry is a love letter to cops. Yeah. You know, especially the ones who actually hated the process that they were being forced to adopt at that time.
Yeah.
Because I don't know when Miranda rights were actually introduced, but, it seems like it was fairly close to when Dirty Harry was released, like within, say, 10, 15 years.
Which would make sense. So, but as I was watching it, I was like, wow, this is, because then suddenly he's helping get a guy off a building.
No, yeah, that's true. I forgot about that too. Fuck yeah, the suicide attempt. Yeah,
there were just so many scenes as a viewer that I was like, this is not tightly wound like every other Dirty Harry movie that came after this.
Yeah, I think the thing about this too is if you go back, let's say, to 1968, and Siegel and Eastwood did a movie called Coogan's Bluff. That I think actually one of the writers for Dirty Harry was involved. One or two of the writers in Dirty Harry were involved in that film as well. And that film has nothing to say. I mean, it basically is nothing. Like Eastwood plays this kind of like sex pest deputy from fucking Arizona. Yeah, and he's always constantly angling. And that movie really just doesn't have anything to say about anything except hippies are bad and cowboys are good. And so by comparison, Dirty Harry is fucking Casablanca or something. I hate Casablanca, but like
I do too.
some good movie. Insert good movie title.
We just lost a listener at least right there.
Right. But I think with this movie, I feel like that you have that kind of push and pull where you basically have a writer or two who are saying, no, this is great. Like he's shooting the bad guys and he doesn't give a fuck about the rules. And that's just what we need, the anti-hero. And then you have these other people saying, okay, great. You can have that stuff, but we also have to humanize this guy. And we also have to show that his name is Dirty Harry because he does all the shit jobs.
And they will remind you of why he's called Dirty Harry 6 or 7 times.
Yeah, Chico had to do that a couple of times. It's like, oh, that's why they call him Dirty Harry, huh?
Yeah.
So I feel like they're trying to, establish certain aspects of his character with certain scenes. So like with the bank robbery at the very beginning when he's eating the hot dog and he sits down at the lunch counter and immediately asks the cook, hey, is that tan sedan still parked over in front of the bank running?
Yeah.
And so you're trying to establish this guy as being a sharp detective in that and also being a tough guy in that. But then later on with the suicide guy, you're establishing him as kind of like a smart guy who knows how to negotiate with these people, but he also doesn't hesitate to use force because like he basically knocks that guy out when the guy tries to jump and take him with him. And then he brings the guy down in the cherry pickers.
And the crowd is like shaken. They're like, why'd you have to punch that guy? Which I thought was an actually interesting kind of take on it. Because he kills people and no one cares, but he punches that guy and everybody's like, wait, why'd you have to hit him?
Yeah, right. Well, you notice too that the guy that people really get upset about, not the mayor, like this is bad PR upset, but like legitimately get upset about is the older white businessman. When he hits that guy, everybody's upset. When he shoots, the black bank robbers in the middle of the street, everybody's like, well, you destroyed the city street and all that property, but they don't give a fuck about the people really.
Exactly.
And likewise, later on with the Scorpio killer, I think, obviously the fact that he is a serial killer is a bad thing, right?
Right.
But at the same time, he presents himself as a hippie. So that makes him also another of the disposable class.
Exactly.
For the world of this film. And it's almost like the movie in a way was trying to anticipate the criticism that it was going to get once it was released. And in that respect, I think it's an interesting film, but I also feel like that it's probably created a few generations now of police officers who feel like the way Dirty Harry acts is the right way to act, So I think the movie accomplishes that by humanizing Callahan. You said something about the soundtrack earlier.
Yeah.
And I think, to me, the two MVPs of the entire film are Lalo Schifrin, the composer, and Bruce Surtees, the cinematographer.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with that.
Those two together make Eastwood look like $1 million. And
they do, and in a way that's just not contrived. The music right off is super understated jazz.
Right.
There's an understated aspect to his character introduction that I remember responding to, watching it again, going, oh yeah, they don't make you wait. You see his feet walking. They go up to maybe reveal his face as he comes out a door. Like, he's just like running upstairs. It's like,
and Schifrin was always really good at that. I mean, I think to like his score for Enter the Dragon, which is a fantastic score.
Oh my God.
He was always really good at finding things in characters and saying, okay, these are the things that these characters exude, and here are the things that they need, to help them.
Right. And I'm almost positive he's on Magnum Force, because I was like, paying attention to like, please tell me, and then saw his name and was like, okay. And I'm like, wait, am I misremembering that? Because I just wanted it to be true.
No, you're exactly right. Good. He was. In fact, he was on Coogan's Bluff too. So
and it didn't.
The Coogan's Bluff score. The Coogan's Bluff, I felt like was a movie that was just kind of dashed off. It didn't really feel like a well thought out movie. It was very much in the old mode,
Yeah.
And I'm wondering if maybe Siegel turned the corner with Dirty Harry, because then he would go on to make Charlie Varick, which is one of my favorite movies. So I don't know.
Coogan's Bluff also felt like it was an unnecessary hand-holding shift of like, well, you know him from Westerns.
Right.
Now he's going to be a cop, but he's still a cowboy.
Got that cowboy hat on. Yeah.
And
that's
then Dirty Harry comes out and it's like, wait. He's not wearing a cowboy hat. What is going on? Like,
right.
Coogan's Bluff was like your unnecessary middleman.
the transition. Yeah.
Transit. Thank you. I was like, I'm not getting the word. So.
Well, this makes me wonder, because I thought about this, and I think it's a totally wrong theory, but it is something that I thought about, in that I think, of course, Eastwood is talented in a certain narrow band of his acting ability.
Yeah.
And he can play the width and breadth of that band pretty well.
Yeah.
But I also wondered if Eastwood would be such an icon, I guess, if it weren't for great film score composers.
That's a really good and interesting question.
Because you have Ennio Morricone and then Lalo Schifrin were kind of a 1-2 punch. I mean, I know Eastwood, between the Westerns and Dirty Harry and to a lesser extent Coogan's Bluff, like I know he had done other big movies. I think Kelly's Heroes had come out before this, and he had done quite a few other movies.
Yeah.
But I feel like when people go back and say, oh, it's iconic characters like the Man with No Name trilogy and like Dirty Harry, those are the ones that they hit on. They don't go, oh, like whatever part he played in Kelly's Heroes.
Yeah.
So I've wondered about that out loud, and I think it's not a watertight theory at all. But
here's why I don't think it's far off, because I mean it works for me. But then he started doing his own music.
Yeah.
And one could argue that Lalo Schifrin made a huge impact on him because he was doing scores that were more understated, but very jazz-based, very similar to, like, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. But then he was in control of the music because he's making it.
Yeah, right. With someone like Schifrin or Ennio Morricone involved, it seems like the movie benefits from another point of view.
Yeah.
You know?
Which it's funny because I would agree absolutely, just because I think that music is just one of those things that most people don't notice unless it's wrong.
Right.
Or there's an absence of it and you're like, whoa, this is okay.
Right.
I can hear my heartbeat. What's going on? Like, that's great. But I think that when it's just used so effectively, you have to really notice, like, wow, this is all really working.
Yeah.
This is really working.
Right. It's kind of like editing in a way.
Yeah, I was just thinking too. It's exactly like editing. People don't notice until it's bad. Yeah. Or unless you're nerds like us and you're like, there hasn't been a cut. Like, scene is going. I love stuff like that. Like, I'm an absolute nerd for all of that.
Yeah. Well, and it's weird because in Dirty Harry, I feel like the cinematography is fantastic. I mean, Surtees' cinematography is pretty nuts in this movie.
Yeah. And the city is a character.
Yeah, it is.
As it should be.
It is. And Schifrin's music is great. But in this movie, I feel like there are times when the editing really suffers.
Yeah.
Where it's kind of like, well, why did you do that? Why go there? Why do this? And there are certain shots that I think that, Siegel probably wanted Surtees to do that I don't know. I don't know. They might have gotten along swimmingly, but there are certain shots that it seems like Siegel might have wanted Surtees to do that. Surtees is like, well, okay, I'll do it. But
like early on when they do that weird underneath the metal staircase thing, when he's going from building to building, but just the way it functions, like, hi, I'm under the staircase and now I'm on the side watching him go up. And so I was like, that is a weird ass shot to just throw in.
Yeah.
But it worked. It was interesting. But I remember it standing out as weird. Like, okay.
Yeah. I feel like the movie probably called for a little more of Siegel's typical utilitarian type direction.
Yeah.
Than it actually got ultimately. But Surtees is fantastic, though. I mean, like, the thing about Surtees' cinematography is that he lets things happen in total darkness at times. It doesn't feel like they have to see everything.
Right,
The fact that he lets some things happen in darkness, I think, is great because it makes us kind of feel like we're there more.
Absolutely.
I'm thinking especially of the rooftop-to-rooftop shootout between Callahan and Scorpio, where there's the big Jesus Saves sign that's spinning around the neon sign right above Harry. And I thought that shootout, especially, Surtees left some things to the imagination.
Absolutely.
But the colors in the movie are just nuts. Like you said, that opening scene with the water and the woman wearing, I think she was wearing like a yellow swimsuit. I mean, it was just incredible. Just incredible stuff.
No, it absolutely was. For that shootout scene you're talking on the rooftop that's like one of the notes I have. They just absolutely lead with shooting.
Yeah.
So there's a guy on a rooftop. Okay, well, that's weird. It's the same rooftop, right? Okay, when you hit the light, I'm going to shoot. Full on shooting.
Right. We're just going to blow him away. That's it.
They just fire like twice at least before you really get confirmation that it's him.
Yeah.
This happens a lot. Wait, that guy's briefcase is tan, gun out.
Yeah, right.
In an alley. Like, it was surprising how easily people, okay, well, I got my gun out. This is
this is the first thing he does, walking out into the city street with half a hot dog in his mouth, and he pulls his gun out and cocks it, and it's like, well,
just walking. But I think, just to tie off what you're saying about cinematography, coming from California, that area in particular, it's usually postcardy. People are like, all right, here's Golden Gate Bridge, here's Fisherman's Wharf. It's all tourist trap stuff. Dirty Harry and the other movies also, they treat the city like a character in the same way that if you're in the city, that's it. Like, oh, they do show the Golden Gate Bridge, but they show the Bay Bridge, they show Coit Tower, they show all these things that normally people would establish, like here.
Right.
We're in San Francisco. And the way that they spotlight that and the way that they just show the actual realities of what San Francisco, especially at that time, was. You have gay characters, you have hippies, you have diversity.
Right.
When you were saying before about how they were probably leaning into the criticism they knew they were going to get, like right off, he shoots black bank robbers.
Yeah.
The immediate next scene is him at the doctor's office with the black doctor.
That's right. Yeah.
And I was like, okay, if that guy was white right there, that's intentional.
Right.
I thought that scene alone just kind of was like, yeah, he just shot these guys. But look, here's his black doctor who's like just ribbing him.
Yeah. That's the thing that's important too, is that he knows Callahan.
Yeah.
But he does catch himself because he even says at one point, maybe your wife can read. And he's like, oh, I'm sorry, Harry, because the whole thing is that Harry's a widower and that is supposed to make him likable, I guess, or relatable.
Yeah. Usually in other movies, that just establishes that he's single. So,
yeah. Yeah. Or that he has nothing left to live for.
Yeah. Lethal Weapon. So.
But and you wonder, because later on Harry does have that conversation with Chico's wife,
right,
where he says that he lost his wife to a drunk driver and it was senseless, really.
Yeah.
And he understands the cop life isn't for them and they should get out.
Right.
And she asks why he stays in it and he says he doesn't know why.
Yeah.
But I think he does.
Yeah.
And the reason I say that is because of the scene where the DA calls Callahan in.
Yeah.
And reads in the riot act for doing all these illegal things that basically gave the Scorpio killer the technicality to get off on the kidnapping and death of the teenage girl.
Yeah.
And Harry tells the DA, he's like, well, Scorpio will kill again. And the DA's like, oh, how do you know that? And he says, because he likes it.
Yeah.
And it seems like the truth about Scorpio, but it also seems like the truth about Harry.
Yeah.
And I think ultimately, like, he just likes being the guy to go in and just clean up a mess, even if he's the guy who makes the mess.
Right.
And you can kind of tell that too in the scene where he and Chico are driving around right before they see the guy with a tan suitcase and then go off into the alley to try to chase this guy who's not the Scorpio killer.
No.
And Harry's saying they should just throw a net over the whole lot of them, meaning all of these people in this area of town that they're patrolling. Mm-hmm. And it's some real proto-taxi driver type shit. Yeah, exactly. It's completely like, we need a really hard rain to wash off these streets, or whatever.
Exactly.
And basically later on, he kind of tells the gay kid in the park who propositions him to kill himself at home.
Yeah. I mean, as many times as there are what I think are great uses of showing that he isn't prejudiced at all. He treats everybody the same. They have the line of like, he hates everybody equally or something like that. But the scene with the doctor being black was important just because you could see that he respects him.
Right.
But then Eastwood has made his career in a movie where he will say the most horrible things about, like, in El Camino,
Gran Torino.
I was like, I had it totally wrong. I was like, why am I blanking? Because I'm not a car guy. I couldn't care less about cars at all. That movie is full of the worst things you can call this character, this family, this race. But he then gives them all of these amazing scenes to act in that the representation they've never had before on film. So it's always this weird spotlighting the problem and then fixing the problem in his own way.
Yeah.
But with the gay guy in the park who's hitting on him. And he's like, I'll kill myself or something. He's like, do it at home.
Yeah.
And you're like, some of it just stings a little bit more when you're like, oh, you were doing really, really good with some of this. And
he's a problematic character, but it's not simply because of looking at the film through a politically correct lens.
Right.
You know, any cop who's worth his or her salt is going to look at this and say, well, of course, you don't shoot an unarmed perpetrator in a football stadium with the full lights on. His hands are up.
Yeah.
He's staring at you. He is not running from you.
Right.
You don't shoot him in the leg, right? Like, there's no safe zone.
But you've established that is an actual hand cannon. So even just shooting him in the leg is...
Right,
like,
right. Especially in the... Didn't he shoot him in... He shot him in the lower leg. I was going to say especially in the upper leg, but I mean, he shot him in the lower leg, but then, of course, he proceeds to torture him, which also will fuck up the case, you know?
Yeah. He had absolutely no concern for the consequences of his actions on every other part of the legal system that he had trouble with.
Yeah.
They're just going to let him on the street. It's like, 'cause you shot him and tortured him.
Yeah, right. Well, and it sets up kind of this false narrative in a way, too.
Yeah.
Because the whole idea is that he tortures this guy, this Scorpio, because Harry thinks that he still has time to save this young girl who the Scorpio is kidnapped and buried somewhere.
Right.
And in reality, we find out later on that she was already dead.
Right. But when they're like, he kidnapped a girl and buried her, but his first thing is like, you know, she's dead already, right?
Right.
So then it was like he believed that she wasn't.
Yeah, right. Exactly. Like, then he gives into the false narrative of like, oh, she could still be alive. And the thing that's really kind of jarring about that in a way is if you think about it in the context of things like the War on Terror.
Yeah.
When people were talking about the War on Terror, especially going into Iraq or whatever, they were just like, well, we have to use, you know, torture, basically, because what if a terrorist knows that there's a bomb and it's going to go off in New York City and we have to find out where it is before it goes off? And I'm like, okay, well, that's a solid episode of 24, but it's not real, you know?
Exactly.
And in reality, what happens with torture is that it often just gives you what you want to hear, whether it's true or false.
Right. They're going to say whatever to make it stop. And
exactly.
Maybe some of it's true.
Yeah, exactly.
But...
And so I feel like movies like this have kind of laid the societal groundwork for that kind of thinking.
Yeah.
And in some ways, it's kind of like that creates a feedback loop because you have a movie like this that kind of sets that up. Then people take that to heart, and then people are like in that mindset. And then movie makers make more movies based on Dirty Harry because this is the way people think and this is what they want to see. And it becomes this kind of dark feedback loop in a way.
Yeah, no, I think that's a really interesting way to put it. And I totally agree with that. And then Magnum Force follows this much tighter structure, much more of a movie. But also they step away from some of this whole like just leading with shooting and all that. They talk more about the procedural stuff and they create his problem with the system by showing more of how the system is corrupt.
Yeah.
Instead of just shooting people and then people get mad and he's like, well, when I see a guy chasing like...
Well, and you know, earlier in the episode, I said that it was a course correction, but really thinking about it, it was almost like the filmmakers were saying, well, okay, we know that came off bad, but hey, look, it could be a lot worse than Harry Callahan. Look at these vigilantes who are incredible shots and all these things. And I think that, you know, the idea for Magnum Force, I think, came from a script that Terrence Malick actually wrote.
That's right. I did read
for
that.
Dirty Harry. Did you read about that? And so, you know, it was this idea of there being a cop who is basically a vigilante, kind of paired up with people who are actually vigilantes, and trying to get him to join. And Magnum Force is, I think, probably my favorite Dirty Harry film.
Yeah.
But, you know, watching it again this time, I'm kind of like, well, it still does some of the same things that Dirty Harry does, like with the hijacking sequence, you know, and him having sex with his neighbor who's Asian. But the reason that's in there is because Eastwood got a lot of letters from, you know, Asian women who really loved him. And so that was kind of a give back to them. And so it's got little shit like that. But I do think that it has more to say and more on its mind in 5 minutes than Dirty Harry as a movie has in its entire running time.
Right.
I mean,
and it's just tight. You're going from A to B to C. Like, it makes sense.
Yeah.
And it's functionally tighter.
Yeah. I mean, I think Milius might have worked on Dirty Harry, but I know he worked on Magnum Force. And I think it feels more like a Milius script.
Well, and especially if you are starting from what was a Terrence Malick script.
Yeah.
And then you throw Milius into that.
Right.
Yeah, it's going to be better than
Right.
Dirty Harry. Plus, you don't have to do the origin story anymore. It's why whenever there's a new Spider-Man, a new Batman, whatever, you're like, okay, cool. Let's get through the first one where you're going to remind me how he became this again. And then we can get to see what they can do as this character. And but
they still felt the need to do the hijacking scene of Magnum Force, which is so kind of mind-boggling to me, because I'm like, this movie is 2+ hours.
Yeah.
You're cutting off probably a good 3-4 minutes maybe with that hijacking scene.
Exactly.
And it's all for just kind of to show that he doesn't negotiate with hostage. I don't know. I mean, I don't even really know what it's for, except to reintroduce him and try to ingratiate him to the audience.
And to box check, like, he does all the jobs. He's a hostage negotiator. Why not just also, hey, look, he's posing as a pilot to stop this hijacking because they were driving by?
Right. And who is going to fucking allow that? Oh, well, the FBI's on the way, but we'll let this detective who's eating a hamburger at a retired cop's hamburger stand in the airport just put on a pilot's uniform and go in to shoot up this plane.
No, everybody's cool with it, but
that was probably one of the things about Magnum Force. I mean, looking at Magnum Force again, it's got its own problems. Like, when I watched it this time, I was kind of like, oh yeah, my idea of this movie and what this movie actually is are different, but I agree with you that it is much tighter than Dirty Harry.
Which I liked, and it's not like a huge criticism of this movie, because this movie's place in cinema history is unshakable.
Right.
So, yeah, it was pretty loose. Could have been a lot tighter, shorter, more focused on the investigation, especially for comparing to Zodiac. Zodiac was longer. There were a lot of leads that didn't pan out and stuff, but it just made sense as an investigative piece. And Dirty Harry is like a procedural police movie without procedure or detective work that didn't involve, hey, we're driving past this guy. Should we shoot him?
He's got a tan suitcase. Should we open fire?
I should probably shoot this guy. And it's like, wait, and just see. And he's like, all right. And then it's like, that's not our guy.
Yeah. Well, and it's cool that you bring up Zodiac, because it does kind of remind me of Zodiac and also The Wrong Man, when Harry's running all over the city with the first ransom delivery.
Right.
And the Scorpio's making him go from payphone to payphone to payphone.
And that scene could have been, 45 minutes. Like, after a certain point, you're like, okay, we get it. He's tired. Those would be terrible shoes to run in, which is always what happens. Nobody ever uses shoes that work well for the job. But
Right. But I think the thing about that scene that I really like is the idea of people just living their lives with no idea what's going on around them, with no idea that this guy in a suit running with this gym bag is actually going to pay off a killer that has been terrorizing the city, or at least parts of the city.
Right.
And I like that idea, because that, again, does come up in Zodiac, especially with Graysmith. It comes up in The Wrong Man, as we talked about a couple of weeks back. And so it's an interesting idea, and it also kind of gives you a chance to see how normal people just living their lives can get in the way of somebody who's on this mission,
Absolutely.
The old man who answers the one payphone, and Callahan says, don't answer it. But the old guy answers it anyway. Yeah. And there was nobody there.
Yeah. And you're like, well, that's it. She's dead.
That's it. The other thing that related to Zodiac, actually, there are two other things that related to Zodiac that I want to talk about. Then we can move on to Most Dangerous Game.
Sounds good.
So the the kind of surfacey thing, I guess, is the shot of the list of fallen officers at the beginning of Dirty Harry.
Which was a great way to establish what your intent is right off, because you're not like, we're better than the cops. Like, they're spotlighting.
Yeah.
Like, these are fallen officers. This is
how dangerous it is.
Right.
Like, this is how dangerous this job is. So if Harry is quick to pull his gun when he sees a guy with a tan suitcase, this wall is why.
Right.
And, but one of the names on the wall is Eric A. Zelms, which is one of the cops who might have actually stopped and spoken to the Zodiac right after Paul Stein's murder.
Yeah, see, I never would have caught that. That's
good. And so that is really fascinating to me because I think I said this in the old school Zodiac episode, but Zelms, I think, was one of the guys who came up with the description that fed the sketch that everybody goes off of now. And that was in October, I think, of 69, September, October.
Yeah.
And then in the first few hours of January 1970, he was killed on duty.
Jeez.
And so that's just kind of an interesting connection.
Yeah.
The other thing that I was kind of wondering about connects to Zodiac, but it also connects to one of your favorite films of all time, The Zodiac Killer.
If you're about to say something bad about Zodiac Killer, I want to join you. Yes.
No, Andrew Robinson's performance as Scorpio, like, we haven't really talked about that.
Yeah, that's true. He has the best screams of pain.
The whole due process thing that Toschi was talking about in Zodiac, like, I'm totally on board with that. I know where he's coming from.
Yeah.
But I wanted Scorpio dead.
Yeah.
I mean, I wanted him dead. He was just so comedic and over the top. And it made me wonder if that was done by the filmmakers in some conscious way to needle the Zodiac, to turn him into kind of like this caricature.
It's funny. I never would have thought that at the time.
It's probably wrong.
But, I mean, I don't think so. I think that it's a side effect of the fact that they really needed to have a character that you were 1,000,000% cool with Clint Eastwood killing.
Right.
Because even if you feel bad for him in the football stadium and being tortured, you don't feel at all bad for him at the end of this movie. So even if you're one of the weird people on the fence about whether or not this guy should be allowed to live, they lean heavily into making him so
shrill.
Well, yeah. Well, I was trying to think of prison will not change this guy. This guy is full on crazy.
He's beyond rehabilitation.
Thank you. That was the word I was scrambling for. But yeah, so they kill him. But I think what you're saying, why wouldn't that be part of it too, though?
It's one of those theories. As soon as I say it, then I think, no, that's ridiculous. But then I also stop again when I think, well, I don't know what the mindset was at that time.
Yeah.
Because every single person who looks at the Zodiac case who wasn't there at the time, which is the majority of people, they don't know what the mindset was there, no matter how much research they do. They're never going to know what the mindset is that causes someone making a film like this, or someone writing a book, or someone investigating the case, or whatever, to make decisions that they make. And granted, you can't know that for any individual at any one time unless they tell you what their mindset was and why they did what they did.
Right.
But I also kind of felt like his performance stuck out so much.
Right.
That I asked myself, is it just bad acting? Is it that Siegel's not giving him enough direction? Is there some sort of purpose behind it? But when you say that you feel like they're probably portraying this Scorpio killer as a person who's beyond rehabilitation, that starts to make more sense to me because, if you think about when Harry goes to the football stadium, which is, we find out, is where the Scorpio actually lives.
Yeah, which was odd.
But that scene is to me, it correlates to the scene in Zodiac when Toschi and Armstrong search Arthur Lee Allen's trailer. Yeah. And there were many more details in Zodiac. Like, you actually felt like you almost kind of got to know the suspect by looking around his trailer.
Right.
But then in Dirty Harry, it's a bit different. He just kind of looks around, but you don't really get a whole lot of detail in that investigation because Callahan's not really interested in investigating. He's interested in just catching this guy, and that's it, which I can understand given this kind of contrived narrative that has been established around the girl and everything.
Yeah.
But that was just something that came up for me. I usually try to be understanding when it comes to movies as far as like what a performer was going through or whatever. Yeah. I thought Andrew Robinson was terrible in this.
Well, wasn't it? He's like a play actor, and this is like his first movie, and so I think he just
like he's acting for the cheap seats still.
I think so, and he had no one there to rein him in, and I think he just kept going past 11.
Right.
But yeah, when he gets his scream when he gets stabbed. Someday maybe I'll make that like my text alert. Like ringtone, something, because it is so over the top that, like, what I picture if that movie's made now, I picture more of the Michael Pitt kind of actor doing that role,
right?
And then on purpose being that far into it, but
right. Well, and I think too that the crazier Scorpio looks, the more sane Callahan looks.
That's a really good point. Yeah.
So I wonder maybe that's the mathematics as far as just like making the thing.
Right.
Saying, well, if you push this guy way the fuck on up, then maybe that'll head off some of the criticism that a guy like Harry Callahan would get.
Right. As someone who grew up in the Bay Area, once they kind of barge into the Zodiac's little place, Scorpio.
I almost got him confused too. I know. I've been doing it the whole fucking episode.
They're not really making it easy because it's like he's a Zodiac killer, and we've so far had Gemini, who also, as you pointed out when we were talking before, kills a young black man.
Yeah, that's true.
But Scorpio, Gemini, Zodiac, I mean, they're not trying to hide it much at all.
Yeah.
But when they bust into his place and he had an Oakland Raiders poster, I was like, well, it's okay to kill him because I'm a 49ers fan, and that divides the Bay Area. And so I was on board with, I already didn't like him, but I was like, yep, he deserves to die.
You're like, smoke this motherfucker, Harry. This is too much.
Yeah. So I'm just going to say justifiable homicide is a thing.
Now, let me ask you a question. This is something I've always wanted to know. And this, if you're done talking about Dirty Harry, because I kind of am.
There was nothing else that I had. So, yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So here's a question I have, and then we can go into the intermission.
Okay.
When people say, I live in the Bay Area, right? Do they more often than not mean Oakland?
I think you've got Oakland, Berkeley, Hayward. I think the radius for what people call the Bay Area is a lot larger than what it really is. But there are a lot of people who, like, when they're saying live in the Bay Area, like, they could be meaning Berkeley or Oakland or.
Well, it's interesting because usually when people say, oh, I'm from San Francisco, I'm from Berkeley, I will hear those people more often than the people who say, oh, I'm from Oakland.
Yeah.
Typically, I'm from the Bay Area, and then if you look into them, they're from Oakland, which I don't know anything about Oakland, so I don't know why I don't think people should be ashamed of Oakland, because
no.
Sure
Oakland was just like, it was rougher. And San Francisco just has a lot of the, I don't know, like it has its own, like I live just outside of Portland now, though I'm technically in Washington. But it's the same thing when people are like, where do you live? Oh, near Portland. And you're like, well, what town do you like?
Yeah.
You want to be adjacent to the cool thing.
Yeah. And, right.
And Oakland was much more, as they would describe it then, much more ethnic, much more crime ridden, even though San Francisco was like chock full of crime.
Yeah. Right.
But it just didn't have the like prestige level San Francisco was getting.
Yeah.
And, so when a lot of people are out Bay Area, and it's cooler now, I guess, to be like, hey, I'm from Oakland. And
growing up, I didn't watch football or anything. I was a basketball guy. I'm not anymore. But anytime anybody said anything disparaging about Oakland or something like that, I'm like, man, I'd love to be from Oakland. I think that's a cool ass name for a city.
It's
It seems like a
great city. I've had amazing times in Oakland and in San Francisco. Still don't like the Raiders, even though. But we had this massive skateboard half pipe ramp in my backyard growing up. That's what we did. I just skated all my life. And there was one guy who would come and we would make him take off his Raiders hat if he was going to skate our ramp just for fun, because I love John Madden. I love John Madden. Yeah. Really wish he hadn't coached the Raiders, but he was a perfect fit for it. So anyway, this isn't a football podcast, but we would make this guy take his Raiders hat off.
So the moral of the story is you love the people in the city, just not the team.
Yes.
Because I think that's a message that we should all get behind.
Yes, absolutely. I love Oakland. I love the Bay Area as a whole. Like it just feels like home. But Scorpio could have been wearing a Raiders shirt when he got shot and fell into a lagoon, and that would have been terrible. So
wow. So remake or Rembrandt?
I think this one is a Rembrandt because it's arguably been remade many times. Not the movie itself, but this character sparked every Dirty Harry ripoff character.
Every Bruce Willis action vehicle.
Yeah.
Save for maybe 12 Monkeys, like every Bruce Willis movie.
Yeah, exactly. But then everybody, like Stallone, Chuck Norris, all these guys, they took their more gritty approach to it. But I mean, Dirty Harry changed everything. One of my favorite shows is Justified, and there's no Justified without Dirty Harry.
Oh yeah, I mean, I think Timothy Oliphant is the second coming of Eastwood. I mean,
me too.
I'll say this knowing that anybody who decides to ever say anything to us on social media will disagree with, but I think Timothy Oliphant is the second coming of Clint Eastwood, but better. I mean, I think Oliphant has more range than Eastwood does.
I would definitely agree with that. I think that Clint Eastwood to me is like godhood status. But yes, Timothy Oliphant has range for days.
I think his talent for comedy is what kind of sets him apart, because Eastwood is good at being the straight man.
Right.
But
he has comic timing in moments and stuff. But I also think that Eastwood, like what you said, he's got his range.
Yeah.
He's always been smart enough to push it a little bit.
Right.
You know, with like Honky Tonk Man and stuff like, but he stays in his wheelhouse.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because if it ain't broke, don't fix it.
Well, yeah, and I know people would probably point to Unforgiven, but if you look at Unforgiven, it's basically Eastwood just saying, okay, this character that I've been playing for 25, 30 years at that point, how would that person feel after a life of having done that? And then you flip it over and that's where he's at, you know?
Unforgiven's an amazing movie, but it's a natural progression.
Right,
like it makes sense. With Oliphant's got just crazy comic range, like dramatic range. Just I want him in everything.
The part I think with Oliphant, and this is to me the line that Eastwood couldn't go beyond, Oliphant's little bit part on that episode of The League where he played the sushi chef from Omaha. You mean like Nebraska? Omaha. You know? Like Eastwood could not have done that part. No. I mean, it just is not within his wheelhouse. And Oliphant was incredible. In fact, when you watch that and then you watch something like Justified, it's hard to believe that they're the same person.
I know. Yeah, I am so happy there's new Justified coming out. Tarantino is going to direct a couple of the episodes.
Really? I had not heard about that. Wow.
Yeah, there is a limited series for Justified coming out, and Tarantino is directing at least one, but I think 2 of the episodes. Which, having worked with Oliphant in Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, like that, I'm all happy about that. So I was amazed I didn't work Justified into Dirty Harry, and did last second. So Rembrandt for me, also because I think this story only works then. You can't do the same story now.
Yeah, that's true. It would require a lot of updating for just technology alone. honestly.
Yeah, it's just...
And plus, plus what this movie would be now, which is kind of what it was then, but it would be even more so now. It would be made by people like Blumhouse or whoever who are trying to capitalize on political division, and
that's true.
That would be the movie. I mean, it's one thing to introduce protest and political struggle into a movie like Kimmy.
I'm here.
Damn it.
I had that loaded up too. I was like, you're talking about protest stuff. I'm like, that reminds me of what was it called again?
What was it called?
It was Kimmy?
I'm here.
That's for you, Ryan. We had to get it in there somewhere.
Yeah, exactly.
So, yeah, I mean, like working it into a movie like that is different than what this Dirty Harry remake would be.
And no one's going to touch this cop story right now.
No, I don't think so.
No one wants to play it.
Right.
So it better be a Rembrandt.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, for me, it's a Rembrandt because really even between this movie and Death Wish, like the white guy takes his revenge movie is pretty well established and it's covered and then it's just completely imitated from there. So
exactly.
I mean, hey, if we didn't have Dirty Harry, we wouldn't have Lone Wolf McQuade, and then what kind of fun would it be to live in the world?
But for you, Zodiac expert, you officially qualify.
Oh, yeah, right.
I did read, and this threw me off, that Harry Callahan was partly based on Dave Toschi.
I mean, they might say that, but it was actually Bullet. Bullet was the one that Toschi was based on because of... I think it was like the way Bullet wore his gun or something. Toschi wore it that way. I don't know about Callahan, but my impression is that it wasn't.
Yeah.
I mean, if that was the intention, I bet Toschi was fucking horrified.
That was why when I was like, oh well, that probably didn't land too well with him. Especially the way they have him in Zodiac, Ruffalo being like, who cares about due process?
Ryan and I talked about this in our old school episode, but that episode was 4 hours long. So I understand if people, missed this or didn't even get to it. But the way that Toschi is portrayed in Zodiac feels like probably closer to his true nature from what other people have said and wrote about him than maybe previous drafts of the script. Because in previous drafts of the Zodiac script, there were things like Toschi and Graysmith sitting there eating popcorn, laughing at the screen while Dirty Harry was playing, as if they couldn't believe it. Was like this really bizarre, over-the-top take.
That would be weird.
And Zodiac is one of those scripts where I think, oh, I love that script, but I'm thinking about the movie. I'm not thinking about what was on the page.
True.
I mean, obviously, the final iteration of the script was a great iteration of the script, but the ones I had read were previous drafts that were not good. I mean, I mean, I think one of them even included a car chase that through the streets of Vallejo, in the first killing and all this kind of stuff, more of them being hunted. And so I don't know. Dirty Harry may have been in some way modeled on Toschi, but I don't exactly know how. I mean, I guess Harry, well, he carries his thing in his gun in a shoulder holster, right? But
I could totally see the bullet thing though. Like, they do really show you how Ruffalo wears his gun. In Zodiac. Like, in a couple scenes, specifically in diners or whenever he's leaving.
Yeah, and Avery makes mention of it at one point. He's like, Bullet's based on him. Where's his gun like Bullet?
So, so that makes sense.
Yeah. So, Oakland, we love you.
Except Al Davis. I don't like Al Davis, the owner of the Raiders, So, Oakland, I love you. Raiders, no.
Not so much.
No.
All right, we'll see you after the intermission.
Sounds good.
It's intermission time. Time to pause and refresh at the snack bar. During this short break, you can treat your taste of good food and sparkling cold beverages, including delicious Schlenig. If you're hot dog hungry, we have them. Sizzling, juicy
Roscoe Lippin' Butts
hot dogs served in warm, oven-fresh buns. Plus a complete menu of all your favorites. Visit the refreshment center now. Enjoy delicious food and ice-cold Schlenig.
Need a pick-me-up before our second feature? Visit our snack bar for an ice-cold Schlené coffee. Our brew is crafted from mostly clear Kentucky stream water mixed with the finest bitter beans straight from Columbia, Missouri. Our secret is that we age this smooth beverage at 39 degrees Fahrenheit for 3 days before serving it to you, our loyal patrons. So head over to our snack bar and grab a cup of ice-cold Schlené coffee, a bargain at $4.99 a cup. Schlené coffee, don't drink water, it'll rust your gut.
It's 90 seconds until showtime.
Coming soon to this drive-in theater.
On Friday, March 9th, at 7:20 p.m., one of the most shocking and twisted incidents ever recorded befell Sarah Murphy and her father. Their ordeal lasted 88 minutes. Witness these true events in real time.
Hey, Dad.
Hey, sweetie. I checked your Facebook page. What's his name wrote on your wall again?
God, I should never have added you. How long's it been since you were out here?
Still a long time. Years.
What are you doing here now?
Dad?
What are you doing?
I just thought I heard something upstairs. Daddy? Dad? Who are you? Why are you doing this to us?
It's showtime. And now, please enjoy our featured presentation.
The Most Dangerous Game tells the story of All-American big game hunter Robert Bob Rainsford, played by Joel McCrea. A man who loves to hunt animals and document his exploits, but doesn't respect his quarry enough to try to understand how they feel. Rainsford washes up on the shore of a remote island in the Pacific Ocean after the luxury yacht he was on sinks in a shark-infested channel. As the lone survivor, Rainsford believes himself truly stranded before happening upon the huge castle fortress owned by the Russian Count Zaroff.
Zaroff? With a Z?
Yes, Paul, that's right. Zaroff with a Z. The Count lives here with his 3 henchmen, Ivan, played by Noble Johnson, Tartar, played by Steve Clemente, and Tartar's servant, played by Dutch Hendrian. And the Count owns a pack of huge hunting dogs. As it turns out, crashing in the rough waters off this island shore is pretty fashionable because Count Zaroff already has 2 shipwrecked siblings as guests. Eve Trowbridge, played by Fay Ray, and her upside-down drunk brother Martin Trowbridge, played by Robert Armstrong. Over drinks and coffee and piano ballads, Rainsford and Zaroff talk hunting philosophy, and Eve tries to warn Rainsford that something is amiss with the old world Count. But Rainsford isn't the sharpest arrow in the quiver. Eve tells Rainsford that she and Martin arrived with 2 other survivors, but after Zaroff offered to show those sailors his locked trophy room on successive nights the week before, they both disappeared. Zaroff says they've gone hunting, but Eve suspects foul play. After the Count sends Eve and Rainsford off to bed, he invites Martin to see his trophy room. And you know what that means. Eve knocks on Rainsford's bedroom door later that night and says she's worried that Martin hasn't stumbled into his own bedroom and passed out in his bed yet. Rainsford dresses, complete with a tie, and accompanies Eve down to check out the Count's trophy room, where they find human heads, one mounted on the wall like a hunting trophy, and one floating in a large jar. The Count and his guys come in carrying poor dead Martin under a tarp and lay him down on a table. Eve, of course, loses her fucking mind over this, and one of the henchmen carries her away, while the other two restrain Rainsford by chaining him to the trophy room wall. The Count explains that he was going to tell Rainsford about the whole hunting humans deal last night, but you see, Eve kept monopolizing Rainsford and Zaroff could never really bring it up. The Count thought Rainsford would understand, but Rainsford is all like, what the what? So Rainsford now becomes the prey for Count Zaroff to stalk in the various landscapes of his small but very diverse island. Zaroff says that he will not kill Eve because you never kill female animals. Wow. But Rainsford still takes Eve with him, thinking he can get them both off the island. Zaroff gives Rainsford a knife and a head start to make things quote-unquote fair, and off Rainsford and Eve go. The idea is for them to stay alive until sunrise. Rainsford and Eve set some traps for Zaroff, but none of them pay off. After some back and forth, the Count calls in the dogs, and Rainsford fights two of them in a rocky enclave near a steep waterfall. As Rainsford struggles with the second dog, Zaroff takes his shot, and Rainsford and the canine fall off the cliff. Ivan grabs Eve, and they all go back to the fortress. Finally, as the Count settles in for a quiet evening playing the piano and planning his next shipwreck, Rainsford returns and a tussle ensues. Rainsford stabs Zaroff with one of his own arrows and breaks Ivan's back in the melee and shoots Tartar dead. Rainsford and Eve get in the Count's boat and speed away as the Count tries to fire one last arrow at them from a high fortress window, but he just can't get it up. He falls into the dog pit as the lovers blaze off into the morning sun. So, your general thoughts on the movie?
It's funny because I had never seen this. I mean, it's just the title alone is used so much.
Right.
And this concept
yes,
has been used so many times. But this original, like, it was effective. I'm used to seeing a lot of these movies. Growing up, we would get, we had like a little film projector thing, and we'd get these movies from the library and play, so there's no audio.
Right.
And it's harder to talk about on a technical level because it's just so awkward at moments.
Yeah.
But if I try and look at it as the lens of at that time, if I'm in a theater, I would have loved seeing that in a theater then.
Yeah.
For sure.
Right. Right.
Because they're using the same sets as King Kong.
Right. Some of the jungle sets. Yeah.
And Fay Ray is in King Kong.
Right.
But King Kong is silent though, right?
No. King Kong it's got sound. In fact, they were making King Kong at the same time they were making The Most Dangerous Game.
Oh, at the same time. Jeez.
And this is according to Bruce Eder, the critic who does the commentary on the Criterion edition of the movie. He talked about how the Fay Ray was working on both films simultaneously, but with King Kong, there were all these effects shots that had to be done. And so while they were doing the effects shots, they would then just like shuttle her over to the Castle Fortress set for The Most Dangerous Game, and she would do her part in that. And so I think that's why in this film, sometimes her performance in particular suffers a bit, but it's probably because she was just so fucking exhausted, like, because they said that she at some points was working like, 18 hours a day.
Jeez.
So yeah, they're both sound, but what you're saying really hooks in for me because it is something that if you watch this film, it does come off as awkward and weird at times, but then you do have to think, oh, well, they were just getting used to using sound at that point.
Right. Because she, in so many of the scenes, I guess this is why I was thinking it, and it seems like she wasn't used to delivering lines as much as she was really working that emphatic gesture, physical performance aspect.
Most of her lines sounded like silent movie intertitles. Like
exactly.
And the part towards the end where they think that they've killed Rainsford and Zaroff's henchman, one of them, goes to grab her, and she makes that fainting motion that is classic from silent film. It's a little rough. I mean, I thought her performance in King Kong was better, but I wonder if maybe she got a lot of the stuff done in King Kong before she had to switch over and do Most Dangerous Game.
Probably. I'm guessing the budget was like way better on King Kong.
Yeah. Well, the thing about Most Dangerous Game too was that it was originally conceived as being, I think, like costing twice as much as they ended up giving it. So
crazy.
They cut out a whole bunch of stuff. Like anything that didn't move the story forward, they cut out. So there are cuts of the film probably lost to history at this point, but there have been cuts that were screened that were something more along the lines of like 75 minutes or 80 some minutes long rather than 63. But there are a lot of cut things, and some of the footage, like the sharks, I think they reused that from another film previously.
That looked like they got it from somewhere else.
Right, yeah, because it didn't have quite the same quality. So yeah, I mean, like I agree with you. This is a movie I've seen probably, probably this would be my third time seeing it, fourth time seeing it, and it's okay. I mean, I kind of feel like this movie was made to be an early horror film. And
exactly, I think so too. Yeah.
That's what it is. It feels like something that my version of the Zodiac Killer would really respond to, because it's not a terribly smart film, like it's something that if a person like the Zodiac Killer looked at it, he would not have to be very intelligent to hook into what Zaroff is saying. And
exactly,
because ultimately, like with the Zodiac, the connection with Zodiac is that in the ciphers that showed up at the Chronicle and other papers on the 31st of July, 1969, they referenced this movie for like almost the entire thing. Man is the most dangerous animal of all, blah, 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 blah.
Yeah.
And the idea in the ciphers that killing is better than having sex with a woman,
right?
That's an idea that Zaroff talks about to Rainsford in the film. But the whole idea of the film itself, like the film's intention is to set up this guy in Rainsford that is a big game hunter. He writes books. He makes money off of all these exploits. But then he doesn't ever stop to think about how the tiger feels that he kills.
Right.
And this is for him to learn a lesson. Of course, we have the line near the end of they're climbing a tree, being chased by dogs. And he's like, now I know how my prey feels or whatever. And you're just like, okay. So that's a silent movie line. Okay. We don't need it, but maybe at the time they did. And it's not to say they weren't smart or sophisticated back then, but when you're getting used to a new format, like it just takes some getting used to,
Absolutely. And that's why I'm like, okay, if I'm really going to talk about this, I have to be looking at it like I was watching this at the time.
Right.
Like how we watched Zodiac, that was...
Yeah, right.
So it would have been impressive.
Yeah.
And I don't know that it would have been Sixth Sense-like reveal that it's like, wait, man is the most dangerous animal.
Right.
But it would have been very much more couched in what was horror at that time. If you're talking about Universal Monster stuff, like this is up there.
Well, and I think some of the cutscenes too were scenes that were going to have them seeing a lot more in his trophy room, in Zaroff's trophy room. Like, you know, here they see
the trophy room, exactly.
Yeah, they see like a mounted head on the wall, and then they see that head in a jar. But supposedly there were going to be other things where he had taxidermied people that he had killed. It set up in scenes, like almost funny. Like it was a museum, you know. So it would have been more gruesome and more horrifying, I think. But yeah, I mean, honestly, even if you look at something like this, but then take something like The Mystery of the Wax Museum, which I think might also have Fay Wray in it, take something like that, and to me, that movie is more effective and more horrifying than this movie is.
Right.
And, you know, granted, there are differences. Like Michael Curtiz directed Mystery of the Wax Museum, and this was directed by two guys whose names I'm totally blanking on. But
yeah.
And it was like you had a dialogue coach, you had like an action coach or whatever. It's like, I don't know, movies that have that kind of stuff on them, it's just kind of like, well, okay. Like, this is made to fill a seat. You know.
Right. And this would be so much more effective if you saw some sort of body count. You saw these other people being hunted. You had some concept of Zaroff having actual hunting prowess.
Right.
Which I don't feel came across at all. There are about 300 dogs in the movie, if I counted right.
Yeah.
And they're the real hunting heroes of this whole movie. But it's similar in Dirty Harry, where he's just running phone booth to phone booth. With this, it's you've got this guy coming at you, and they're just kind of running away and hiding. They get found, they run some more, they get. But if there were shots of him actually having taken some people down, it would be a totally different movie. It would be much more effectively like horror based, which I think every other version of this story establishes that the hunter is a formidable presence.
Right. Yeah, because I don't think Rainsford had ever heard of him. No. But he had heard of Rainsford, right? Because he had read Rainsford's books.
Right.
And another thing that Eder says in his Criterion commentary that I thought was interesting was when Zaroff tells Rainsford kind of about his philosophy on hunting and how it's better than having sex with a woman, or how you chase the woman after you chase the prey or whatever.
Yeah.
We should hear that clip really fast. I'll play that clip really fast, and then we can talk about it.
A charming simplicity.
Completely civilized, did you say?
He talks of wine and women as a prelude to the hunt. We barbarians know that it is after the chase and then only that man revels.
It does seem a bit like cocktails before breakfast.
Of course, yes. You know the saying of the Ogandi chieftains. Hunt first the enemy, then the woman.
That's the savage's idea everywhere.
It is the natural instinct. What is woman? Even such a woman as this, until the blood is quickened by the kill.
Oh, I don't know.
Oh, I don't know. You Americans. One passion builds upon another. Kill, then love. When you have known that, you will have known ecstasy.
This thing that Eder kind of brought up, and then it got me thinking about the film Zodiac, is he talks about how it seemed like, in a way, Zaroff was reaching out to Rainsford to try to find somebody else in the world who would understand him.
Absolutely.
At his level, right? And with Zodiac, it was kind of the same thing. Like, if you look at that film, you have this person who's not the killer reaching out to Melvin Belli, but then you also have Arthur Lee Allen apparently reaching out to Belli, and in that film, Arthur Lee Allen is the killer.
Right.
My question then becomes, are the Zodiac and Zaroff, are they ever really sincere about these moves of reaching out to one another?
I mean, that's a good question. I would imagine the Zodiac, in reaching out, would never expect to find someone else.
Oh, that's a good point. Yeah.
With Zaroff, I think his motivation seems pretty clear. He does think these guys are going to become great friends and hunt people on his island. He seems to genuinely believe this is a possibility and is very surprised when it doesn't happen, which also is oddly mirrored in Magnum Force that we talked about, where these
it's
four vigilante policemen absolutely believe that Dirty Harry's going to side with them because look at him.
Yeah.
And he doesn't.
Right.
So,
That's a good point. I mean, I actually would have expected Harry to maybe side with them.
I know, huh?
You know?
He was impressed, and then it was just they crossed a very specific line that they had to create for that movie to be a line that he has, because he had no line in the very
They killed rich people. That was the line. Right. I think you kill the poor, it's no big deal, but if you kill rich people, then Harry's got a problem with it.
He does. What do you think though about that concept of like the Zodiac actually reaching out for?
I agree with you. I mean, I don't know a lot about the history of serial killers.
Yeah.
Like I'll listen to the occasional true crime podcast, but it seems like a lot of serial killers don't reach out because they don't want to be caught.
Well, it's funny because this came up when we were talking about Zodiac before. I think the last episode we did. I watch a lot of the serial killer stuff and in its various forms, documentary, etc. But what's funny is when you were saying that, how they caught BTK always reminded me of Zodiac, and I hadn't brought it up, but he wanted to have dialogue with the cops. So he asked them, if I give you a floppy disk, can you trace that? And the cops are like, no, which they can. Yeah. And that's how they caught him. He sent them a floppy disk, and it had his basically server data, location data, and they went there and caught him. It was wow. And you're like, what? And so, yes, I think the majority of people don't reach out. I think that whole needing press thing or whatever, but I do think the examples of when they do reach out, that's usually like the worst decision they could have ever made. And I think people who are actual Bundy-like level, they just do it.
Well, and that was something that I read a book. I can't remember the fucking book, but it's been a while ago. And I think it was co-written with someone else by Pee Wee Gaskins, who was like a killer who had, he's one of those guys where he gets caught for a murder or a string of murders, but then he starts copping to everything.
Right.
And he, I think in that book, said something about not wanting to get caught. Like, serial killers go up and down and they have these places that they hunt and they don't want to get caught, which is why they hide bodies or whatever. I mean, with Zodiac, it was a little different because everything was just kind of left there for people to find. Like, granted, a lot of the people were killed or attacked in remote areas. But with the Paul Stein murder, it was right in the middle of the fucking city,
Right.
Which, I don't know. I mean, I still am dubious as to whether...
which things were actual Zodiac versus...
Yeah. I mean, I know that there are people throwing their phones out there right now, but that's just, I just always have been suspicious about that. But yeah, I go back and forth because I think maybe if you have somebody, depending on their mental state, if they truly are kind of split... which the Zodiac in his letters claim to be.
Yeah.
This is, I only look like that when I do my thing, which is what he said of the police sketch.
Right.
If you have that kind of mind that there is, I'm not saying multiple personalities, but there is a duality there.
Yeah.
Then, maybe one side of that duality does say, I need help. I've got to figure it out. But here's the thing is that you wonder if people in that situation realize that if a cop tells you that he's just trying to help you, he's lying to you, right? Because he's making the collar. That's what it is. So if he's saying, we know you did this, chances are, if they know it, they would have already charged you. They don't necessarily need you to confess.
Right.
And so... I kind of look at somebody like a Melvin Belli as in the same vein of like, Belli lies to that guy who calls it on the morning show in Zodiac. So reaching out to a guy like Belli, like, is that really reaching out? I agree with you about Zaroff. I think between the two, Zaroff is the one who is legitimately reaching out.
Yeah.
I guess my question is how much of that is a ruse to see if he can get Rainsford into the idea of having a competition where they hunt each other versus getting a partner to do a friendly wager with.
Yeah, but I can totally see that too. I can see that being a thing.
The other thing that I'd like to talk about before we move on to other stuff is total speculation. Obviously, we're not a true crime podcast.
We are not.
We're a film podcast, and we're kind of like whatever cut rate Columbo type you can think of. But I do think it's interesting that they bring up the fact that Zaroff had a head injury.
Yeah.
That he was injured while hunting, and they seem to talk about that in a way that makes it seem like the catalyst for his psychotic tendencies. And that made me wonder if it pertains somehow to Zodiac and if that could be an identification point with Zodiac.
It's interesting because I had not thought about that at all. I thought that they did a kind of good job of also describing Zaroff's ennui and his like, I killed this stuff and it did nothing for me, so I needed to up the ante or whatever.
Right.
But the head injury is a huge thing there. He's always rubbing that scar, and
it's a big scar too.
And he did dramatically change after that happened.
Well, and the interesting thing too is that actor who plays Zaroff is this guy named Leslie Banks. And I think that he had been like a big time British actor who had also been on Broadway. And he was injured in World War I. And it paralyzed the left side of his face. And so they kind of use that to their advantage in his portrayal of Zaroff.
Using his big Tom York energy.
Yeah, right. And I didn't really notice it all that much until
I didn't either.
Until he tried to make it facial expression, and then you're kind of like, okay, one side's moving and the other one's really kind of not. If you look at some of the close-ups of him.
Yeah.
But that was something I wondered about Zodiac. Obviously, we don't have any idea. I mean, they always say that most serial killers who have a head injury have it in the front of their head.
Yeah, so it just shuts off critical thinking parts.
Yeah.
No, it's interesting because, I mean, did that factor into whomever it is they posthumously declared?
Oh, you mean the Gary Post guy that they just figured? Yeah, I don't know. I don't know if that ever worked in with him or not. I know that they said that he had, I think, been in the military and was training military people, but I don't know if it ever figured in that he had any sort of head injury. But I don't know. That was just something I thought of because I know that there are times when I see a movie and if my particular illness or disability is represented in a way that I understand and can be kind of like, it is like that, then I identify with that character more and say, well, this is why he or she is making this choice because of this, this, and this,
Yeah.
So kind of like with Angela and Kimmy.
I'm here.
There she is.
We're going to be doing that too much probably. But that's such a good movie. Like we're still riffing on it because it's a good movie. It's a good point. But with her, I understood things when Angela would go out of her apartment that it's kind of like, oh yeah, that's exactly what that's like. And so I think that's probably the thing, most recently that made me think of this, just wondering if
I can totally see that. I guess I lean more towards the mental illness aspect than maybe dramatic head injury. I think Zodiac Killer, like all of the slave voices, his potential slaves that he hears and stuff. So you have some arguably schizophrenic aspect to him.
Right.
I like it when there is something that is more identifiable to me, where I'm like, right, maybe mental illness does factor in. I think one thing that Zodiac wanted he just seemed to really want fans.
Yeah. Right.
Just fans in general to wear his buttons.
Yeah.
Just the celebrity aspect. I think Zaroff genuinely just wants to hunt people.
Yeah.
He found his thing.
Yeah.
He's like, I like this. It seems like you'd have better numbers as far as victims go if you didn't completely wreck their ship and hope they make it to your island alive.
Maybe if you hunted sharks first.
He had a boat full of victims. There were 5 to 7 people on that.
Yeah.
And one guy made it.
Yeah. Well, and yeah, I mean, like, and it was because of those waters were shark infested, and he kept changing the lanterns around that would tell people where the choppy waters were. And yeah, I mean, it's kind of like, well, why don't you go spearfishing and then do the shit where you get because you're going to get a whole lot of people, but.
Or like put a fake nightclub on your beach.
Yeah.
Have people pull in safely and you get all 7 of them.
Yeah.
And then you drug them.
Right.
And then you drag it out. Like, it's just poor design.
Then it becomes hostile, I think is.
Then it does become hostile. Which, for 1932, would have been very progressive.
Right. I think comparing, like, the hunt with sex is probably as far as they were willing to go.
Yeah, because, I mean, that's the thing. I try and use that lens, but, man, yeah, that must have been super provocative at that time.
Yeah.
Like, wait, what? You're talking about sex and killing in the same sentence?
Yeah,
and
right.
You're like, well, yeah, people talk about that all the time now, but then they're like, I can't even get over the fact that there are monkeys as big as King Kong. Gorillas. I know it's a gorilla. But so now you're going to tell me people kill and have sex? What is happening?
Right.
And they could have pushed that to cannibalism so easily.
Yeah, I mean, nowadays it would be pushed to cannibalism. I mean, I haven't seen these recent iterations of The Most Dangerous Game to see how much they're like this or if they're based on this, because I think there's like a TV series out now or something now, right?
There was a movie that came out that I actually did want to see with Betty Gilpin, just called The Hunt.
Yeah, right.
And it seemed more class-based kind of thing.
Wasn't that the one that Blumhouse like made, but then they held off putting it out for a while, and then they put it out?
I think so. Yeah. I mean, Blumhouse, A24, kind of market cornered for stuff that to me seems kind of appealing, like for just the sheer number of things they're putting out. But anything that's potentially even horror, like the Invisible Man version that came out, that's Blumhouse, like that one's really good. But yeah, I think that one's called The Hunt. I know it was on HBO Max for a little while, and then I went to watch it and it wasn't on there anymore. I'm like, damn it. So I missed my window. But the same thing, people get hunted for sport.
But it's based more in political.
I think it's got some class thing. I do think that I thought they armed them. I can't.
Well, and I mean, that's the thing about this movie, too, is that Zaroff nominally says he's going to make things fair. Like, he gives you a knife and he's fed you great food and all this stuff. And then you have to go out and he gives you a head start and you only have to survive until sunrise. And if you survive until then, I mean, he says he'll let you go, but come on.
Which he almost does.
Yeah.
If there are no dogs, which 2 dogs get killed.
Yeah.
On screen.
Yeah.
2 dogs fake get killed, which out of all the lines that you can't cross now, those dogs wouldn't die from him literally stabbing 2 dogs to death.
Yeah.
No.
Well, and that's a whole thing, like in screenwriting, they talk about the idea of kicking the dog. Like, you never want to have the main character kick the dog.
No one questions John Wick's motives.
Right.
They're like, did you see that fucking puppy?
Yeah.
They all need to die.
Right.
Like,
right.
There's no hesitation.
Wouldn't it be incredible if people were like that with all the other people? Like, if they were that protective.
Your fellow man, women, children.
That's crazy. So, yeah, I don't have much more to say about this movie.
No,
I mean, I think the kind of connection with Zodiac is interesting, but as a movie, I mean, I got it for this episode, but it's a movie that I don't know if I'll watch it again, like.
I can confidently say that I won't watch it again. I didn't dislike it. It's just, I think that concept is able to be further explored in a better way now.
Yeah. Right.
And like what you were saying, things were in a really awkward state. So we're just doing some dialogue stuff. It's not that great. There's still some crazy dramatic, weird close-ups.
Yeah.
Overly aggressive movements.
Yeah, right.
There's one point where Ransford is talking and Fay Wray just turns and looks at him, and I'm like, I can't tell if she's trying to emote that she's in love with him, that she's scared of him. I don't know what's happening, but it is absolutely distracting me from what he's saying to Zarov.
Yeah, right.
And so it's filled with a lot of those kind of awkward things.
I think there was a part in there. I don't know if this was part of that little sequence or not, but there was this part where Eve first meets Rainsford. Yeah. And then she tries to subtly tell him that there's danger. So like she spills hot coffee on his hand or something, and she says, "Oh, sorry."
I do think that that's the one time anybody's used the word subtle in relation to this movie.
Well, subtle relative to the rest of the movie.
No, I think her attempt at subtlety, like what you said, yes, she did attempt, and then literally knocked a cup off.
Yeah. Well,
full view.
And you think to yourself, like, okay, so Zarov is this fantastic hunter, but he's not getting that signal, right? Like, he doesn't pick up that she says the word danger about 50 decibels louder than she says the rest of her sentence, you know? There's a certain danger.
I can only hope it's the head injury.
That's right.
Playing in there. No, I'm with you. I don't know that I'm going to watch this again. I will watch things that play with this concept because I like the concept.
Right. But I thought that, for what it's worth, I thought the sets and even the rear projection or whatever that they used for some of the bigger scenes, I thought that stuff kind of worked. I mean, the rear projection, you could tell that it wasn't right, but it also created kind of this off-kilter feeling that I really liked, this atmosphere that I really liked.
Right. The version that I watched that's on IMDb TV, so anybody who wants to watch it for free, it's there, is colorized, which I don't know.
Really? Oh, wow.
Which made everything seem muddy.
Yeah.
It was one of the times where I was like surprised that this got colorized.
Yeah, I wonder if it was one of those early colorizations, because the early colorizations were terrible. Like the stuff that they started doing in like the 1970s, I think, they were just awful.
So the reason why I bring that up is the reverse projection stuff stood out like a lot more colorized.
Yeah, I would bet. I'll have to take a look at that though, because I'm kind of fascinated by that. Well, we've talked about before how one of my things that I'm fascinated with is the color version of a movie, the black and white version of a movie.
Yeah.
And I think there's a lot of difference when it's intentional, you know, versus something like that where it's like, well, all these people are dead, but we're going to colorize this movie anyway.
Right.
Like a Ted Turner decision.
Yeah, exactly.
Sometimes that can really help a film, and most of the time it doesn't, but sometimes it can really, depending on who does the color. I mean, it's still nothing like that, 2-strip, 3-strip Technicolor that they did in like Mystery of the Wax Museum and Dr. X. Like those movies, I kind of like that because it's such an unreal look.
Yeah, this looked very, I don't know, like my first watercolor kit.
Yeah, kind of pasty. Yeah, right.
Yeah, it wasn't great. Yeah, so the rear projection stuff stood out like more. I do like that they really, like, if what you're saying, I have more respect for it. If how you're saying they cut the budget in half, because that whole like now shipwreck, and then they're just on wood, and then they're like, a shark got me, and then they cut to like B-roll footage of some shark swimming, and they just sell it by and then going underwater, and then the captain's like, it got me too, and he disappears.
Goes underwater. Like, okay, well, see you later. I mean, it got cut in half right before the production started. So
Wow.
Yeah, I mean, that's just kind of out of nowhere. And I blanked on their names a while ago, but I did find them here in my notes.
Okay.
The directors were Ernest B. Schoedzak and Irving Pichel. And so Schoedzak was the guy who was responsible for keeping the story moving, and Pichel was the dialogue director. So a lot of the fault lie with pichelle when it comes to the way lines are delivered. But supposedly Zodiac would do a take that was 30 seconds long, and then he would say, "That was great. Let's do it in 20 seconds."
So crazy.
And so that's why they would go again, but faster, and that's why the exposition is so fast in the movie.
Yeah,
why everything just goes by. So
that is so funny.
And again, that's according to Bruce Eater's Criterion commentary, which was pretty dry as a commentary, and he was a little repetitive, but it was also interesting. I mean, he brought up a lot of interesting stuff about the film that made it more interesting. But this is something, though I'm still thinking about the colorization thing. So
yeah,
the centaur carrying the dead woman on the door knocker, what color was that?
I think it wasn't like brass, like it was still dark.
It was like a dark iron or something.
Yeah, like a dark, I'm even picturing it more cherry-ish color, almost like a dark.
Yeah. So like they were maybe going for a rusted iron or a rusted metal, but they kind of ended up.
I think, they ended up with what they got.
Yeah.
Which, I mean, you figured it was metal, but it didn't look very metal.
Right.
So,
I like that they had that was out there, and then the tapestry was inside.
Yeah.
With the same basic, not the same design, but the same idea, like the centaur and the woman.
If I'm remembering right, though, like some of it was kind of interesting because, like Ivan, the right-hand man henchman, also looks like he could have been filming the Wolfman at the same time.
Right.
He was wearing yellow. So
really?
Yeah. So it was interesting because it just, I mean, it's all the facial hair stuff with him and the eyebrows. But
I wonder if they went back to any sort of notes to do those colorizations, or if they just were kind of like, well, I took this picture of this yellow thing, and this is what it looks like in black and white. So that's probably yellow, when it might not.
But I do remember, like with Ransford and stuff, like he's just wearing basically a white shirt and black tie, black pants. Like they didn't go overboard and make it Wizard of Oz. Like,
emerald green.
Yeah, but there were some choices made.
That's funny. That's
all the dogs are brown,
of course,
like the exact same color for all 300 dogs.
I think Eater said that those were like Harold Lloyd, the silent film actor. Those were his dogs. Oof. And he was upset because when he got them back, a couple of them I think had been just injured just a little, like not like a broken leg or something, but nicked or something.
Like stabbed with a huge hunting knife,
right?
And thrown off a cliff.
Thrown off a cliff. Yeah, I think that was it. He lost like 2, and he was pissed.
Yeah.
But I think they were, from what Bruce Eater said this on the Criterion disc, I think he said that those were all his dogs, and that Great Danes are big dogs, but they're not necessarily considered ferocious dogs, at least that I know of.
Right.
So you see them being shot from below a lot, and so I don't know. I think he said Harold Lloyd. Because Buster Keaton is, if he had said Buster Keaton, I would have remembered that because I'm always kind of listening for Buster Keaton's name for some reason. Whenever someone says silent film star, I always think of Buster Keaton. So I think
Lloyd's up there though. So like that, that would make some sense.
Yeah.
But it's so weird. Yeah, those dogs were over the top.
Those poor dogs though, when they tried to like jump up on that one,
I know, totally.
ravine, and a couple of them get up, but then the others just fall. Like that one poor pup can't get up there.
That was maybe the only actual feeling I had watching the movie. Like I was more in critical mode, so I don't want to say like I was void of feeling, but I was just more like analytical.
Yeah.
But when these dogs, I was amazed the first few made it up. I'm like, geez, look at that. And then the one didn't. I'm like, oh, he knows that not only did they make it up, but they're like another couple hundred behind him who saw that. And I was like, oh, and I felt really bad for that dog. I'm like, I hope he's one of the ones who got killed, so he doesn't have to live with that like anymore.
So let me get this straight. Rainsford does not go into the mind of the animals that he's hunting to try to understand them, but you do go into the minds of animals that are on screen.
I did. I was like, oh, that sucks for that dog.
You're kind of like an empathic Beastmaster in a way.
Oh, you mean Mark Singer, Beastmaster?
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
That's another movie that I'm amazed that you and Ryan didn't do an episode on to make me realize that I was in love with this movie that was actually terrible.
Only because we didn't get to it.
That's true. Like all the Chuck Norris movies that I can't watch now.
I got a 4-pack of those I'll send to you because I'm not going to watch them ever again. All right. Well, so I think I know the answer to this, but remake or Rembrandt?
I mean, I'm guessing we both feel the same way, that this is a Rembrandt and it's already been remade so many times that if this is the template for the time, it would have been, even just that shark stuff would have been alarming because you're forced to have it be another link to Zodiac. It's more Fincher-like because you just see a shark and then you see people going, and disappearing underwater. So you're doing all the work, which would have been, is better. That would have been horrifying for a lot of people in the audience at that time.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it's pretty effective. It's over the top acting, but also
it's not as bad as it could have been.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Except for, we didn't focus on, because it's not worth focusing on, but the drunk brother, like,
although I will say, besides Leslie Banks, right, the Zaroff, Armstrong was my favorite performance of the movie because it was so crazy, but it also brought this levity to it, and in a way it cast this light on the whole thing that I think people at that time probably needed to have some comic relief from this whole heavy trip that Zaroff was laying on them about, killing and fucking.
And that guy just genuinely wanted to be liked. He wanted Zaroff to like him, and you're like, oh, I can see that. I absolutely do not believe that he sobered up before he was killed.
Well, and that's that. You know what? It's funny you bring him up because something, he is probably the example in the film of Zaroff's bad faith about the things that he says to Rainsford, because he says, I give them a knife, I feed them good food, I equip them, and then I send them out, and then it's just, mano a mano, basically. But it's not, right? Because when Zaroff takes Martin into the trophy room, he's not sober.
He is barely even alive.
Yeah,
at that point, I would argue.
Right. I mean, he's barely conscious. And so, that is an example of his bad faith. I'm glad you brought him up.
Did he kill the brother right then? Because he got horned up talking about killing and sex. And
I think he may have.
That's funny. I didn't think about that until right now, but he just suddenly needed to kill.
Yeah, that's a good point, because that conversation with Rainsford was not separated by very much time before he said, hey, Martin, you want to see the trophy room?
Yeah.
So weird. That's a good point. And granted, like, he got Eve out of the way, like sent her up to bed and sent Rainsford up to bed before he took Martin to see the trophy room. But, you'd think if Eve had the suspicion that she had, she would have just clung like glue to her brother. But but then again, I don't know. I mean, there would be no story.
That's a good point.
And I don't think she was actually in the original story that this was based on. There were no women in it.
That is interesting because, I mean, it's a critical part of the story because it's just his dominance and prowess, and then he's that's his slave now.
But then it's interesting because in the end, he tries to shoot that arrow. I think I said this in the synopsis. He tries to shoot that arrow and he just can't get it up. It's like really kind of a phallic thing. He's like,
it is. It is. And then he just falls down and is eaten by 300 dogs.
There were like 15 dogs.
I know.
Let's be accurate for people listening. There were like 15 dogs, but it does seem like there were 300 because
I'm not good at math, so I just round up. But I usually go by hundreds.
Yeah.
I know people go by fives.
Yeah, you round up by factors of 100.
I do. I'm like, how many are there? I'm like, 300 easy.
You're like, this is a dozen
my
eggs,
daughter's
Aaron.
learned way early on that don't ever ask. She passed me in math like when she was 5, probably. But that was always what? How many was I? Like 87. They're like 4.
Yeah.
It's just so 300 is a good round number.
For you, it's close.
For me, it looked about right. Sounded about right.
Yeah. They were definitely not skimping when it came to the sound of those dogs barking.
Oh my God, totally.
So for me, it's a Rembrandt too. I agree with everything you said.
So.
Yeah, it's been remade over and over again. So
it's a great concept, but
you
just got to have more. Now.
Right.
Like you have to have a reason to, I don't know, root for one side or the other.
Yeah, I mean, one thing I will say about it is that even for being a film of that time that was kind of hamstrung by the budget thing, and so you basically only have pretty much 3 sets, because if you count the jungle set as one big set, because apparently it was absolutely enormous, then, for a movie that was kind of as contained to a boat and then a castle fortress, basically one room in the castle fortress with a couple of shots in a bedroom, and then the jungle, I thought it definitely kept me going, but it was a long 63 minutes, It
was. And one thing we didn't talk about that I know you had a note on, I think the bookmarking of they get there, Zaroff locks the door with that thing.
Oh yeah. So when Rainsford shows up, I think Ivan or one of the other guys shuts the door, and the lock and the latch clicks, and it surprises Rainsford because this guy is hiding behind the door. But then when Rainsford comes back later on after the whole hunt is over with, he comes in that front door and shuts it, and it clinks, and it surprises Zaroff.
And
so
it sets up one of the weirdest physical fight scenes I've ever seen.
Yes.
That was the only other thing where I'm like,
That's
we
right.
kind of have to talk a couple minutes about.
We should, yeah. That's
just
funny.
The craziness of how many people flip over chairs and so. And it's
I know.
like, talk about a long take for stuff like that.
Yeah.
But it is the weirdest, aggressively physical, and no regard for the safety of actors, the way they're throwing them around.
And it's like really, it's something I really like. It's really sloppy.
Yeah,
it
is.
It's stark and sloppy, and you see this camera basically kind of just up on a high pedestal, just watching all this shit happen with a few cut-ins on Zaroff and on Rainsford and whoever he's fighting.
Henchmen guy. He had the one henchman guy left, I think, at that point.
Yeah, I get a little confused, but he was fighting with one of them. I can't remember what happened to the other one. And there's a third one that he shoots as they're getting ready to get on the boat. He and
right,
and Eve are getting ready to get on the speedboat.
Yeah, and Ivan's down from the spear.
Yeah, right. So
I think there's just the one guy left.
Yeah.
And Zaroff taking on Rainsford. But the way that there is no regard for their safety at all. They're just a couple times, the way that they're thrown over furniture and fall and jump back up and jump right back into it was impressive because it was so weird.
And it looked like Joel McCrea doing those stunts. Like, it didn't look like they had a stunt double or anything. It looked
there was
like him.
I don't know how they could even use one because it seemed like one take.
Yeah, it really did. And it was just close enough that you could tell who the faces were. And the thing that Rainsford kills the henchman with is like this weird swing around his backbreaker thing. Where he breaks his back. It's some real pro wrestling shit, but
yeah.
It was interesting. I mean, it was kind of a knockdown, drag out affair. Yeah,
totally. Super frenetic. When it happened, I'm like, okay, I was expecting, based on all the other stuff, like it's gonna be fake punch, whatever. And I was like, what is happening? This is great. That was great.
It's a nice surprise to take.
It was a great way to close it.
Yeah,
like I thought. So,
well, great. Well, that's The Most Dangerous Game. Aaron has mentioned this a couple of times in passing this episode. Next month, I think we're going to do the long shot month. And when we say long shot, it's not like my chances of directing a film before I die. It's not that kind of long shot. It is the long shot where you have movies that take place in one shot, either really or conceptually. And then you have the long takes. So right now, I mean, we have a few ideas for the movies that we're looking at.
Right.
We're talking about doing something a little bit different where we try to do a podcast episode in one shot rather than doing any editing or anything, which sounds like laziness. And honestly, part of it is. But also, we kind of want to experiment with the idea of the long shot. Yeah. So...
and the live in front of a studio audience. Like even though, pandemic, but the long take concept would be interesting.
Be the place to do it. We'll give it a shot. You'll get to hear all the ums, ahs, likes.
The likes for me.
The pauses for me.
It's never gonna fully go away every time. I hear it now every time.
I know. I think I have cut out like a Gone with the Wind's worth of pauses on my end.
And my likes. When I first moved to Indiana from California, I was like, let's see. The word I had to excise from my vocabulary because every other word was cool.
Yeah, right.
It was every other word. And I caught myself, someone probably said something like, oh, would that be cool? Like, haha. And then I'm like, oh. And so I effectively got cool out. Like is just going to happen because...
That's just how it goes.
That's just in there. Like,
yeah.
See? So now it's in there more. But... I'm good with but I'm also conscious that it's there. So there are less than it's.
Oh, I have so many that I leave in. Right. Exactly. Like those things that I end up leaving in and I'm just kind of like, oh, fuck.
Yeah.
You have something else to say precisely. But then if I say precisely, I end up sounding like Sherlock Holmes or something. Precisely. I can't say precisely without getting really kind of sharp in my speech.
I don't feel like with us that it's very conversational, which is what we're going for anyway.
Yeah, right.
We're not, this isn't I don't know, a Spalding Gray monologue.
Right.
But there are people that I watch on YouTube, stuff that some content, there's one person that I've watched and he says basically, again, I'm not good with math, but at least 800 times every episode. I think I'm right.
What does he say?
Basically.
Oh, he says basically. Oh, wow. Oh, okay.
800 times a minute. So,
wow.
Give or take.
So like 8.
So like 8 times maybe. But it stands out because, like you were saying, precisely. I mean, for me, like is a comma. It's a functional comma, I'm guessing.
Yeah.
But it's also setting up a simile at times or whatever.
Yeah, but it's hard to know when to draw your weapon, I guess.
I know.
That's the issue. It's because when I say something like right or exactly, I'm just trying to let people listening and that I'm listening to you and I agree with you.
Me too. I say right all the time or or like.
But when you start thinking about it drives you insane,
I know. So. But this is the thing. It's conversational. I will keep editing ineffectively, apparently, as I just showed. But what this guy that I'm talking about on his YouTube stuff in the comments, they're invariably, I kind of scroll through and so many people that just put basically. Their comment is basically. It happens 5 or 6 times.
Lucky for you, we don't get any interaction on social media, so we're going to be good, I think. So that's the nature of the beast.
It's a one-way street.
Yeah, or maybe some people will hear that particular episode should we, do it and just think to themselves, oh, fuck this, and then give us a bad comment and a bad review and stuff. Maybe that's, everybody needs a transitional film.
If they haven't yet, I don't feel like that'll push them over the edge as much as...
Yeah. Well, it could, it could, especially if we pair that with the idea of doing a film like Russian Ark, because I think if you put Russian in anything now, then you basically are...
Oof, that's a good point.
Yeah.
Plus,
all right.
It's 5 hours long. Is that?
No, that one's about like 80 something.
Oh, okay.
Long. Yeah.
Okay.
No, you're thinking of Satan Tango, which is like Bellatar.
Yes.
Yeah, that's.
Yeah.
I thought we should watch that, Aaron, but it is 7 hours and 19 minutes. So.
7 hours.
Yeah.
Yeah. So okay.
Probably not. But all right, man. Well, thank you for joining me tonight, Aaron, and
thank you. I had not seen Most Dangerous Game, so I'm glad it's in the
mental Rolodex of movies that you've now
actually
seen.
What I was about to say was mental Rolodex, and then I'm like, is that too old a reference? But then...
Who gives a fuck? Let them look it up. They have Google.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
But don't Google as you're driving out of the drive-in.
No good.
Short attention span monkeys. All right. Well, we'll talk to you soon.
Thanks, and talk to you later.
Thank you for joining us on the Art House Drive-In Picture Show. We hope you enjoyed our double feature this evening. Our show is edited and produced by Markham Harvey. Our executive producer is Ryan Mason. Our logo and artwork are created by Rafifi Randolfo. Our announcers are
Lila Pseudonym
and
Lane Hewitt.
Follow us on Twitter or Instagram at Arthouse Drive-In, or head over to our website at arthousedrivein.com, or shoot us an email at arthousedrivein@gmail.com. Please subscribe, rate, and review the show on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Good Pods, or any other podcatcher of your choice. Most importantly, though, tell your friends. Sneaking your buddies into the Art House Drive-In in the trunk is not only allowed, it's encouraged. Sure, our head ticket guy, Stubbs, won't like it, but we'll vouch for you. We're your friends. We're not like the others. Join us next time for another fantastic episode of the Art House Drive-In Picture Show. We appreciate your patronage. Don't forget to hang up your speaker, and please drive carefully on your way out.
Was he into movies? Was he a movie buff?
I can tell you that he was not into people.